What's going on, guys? It is June 12th, 2026, 4:39 p.m. And today we're going to talk about, I'm going to talk about um, basically my spiritual journey and kind of the roads I've taken from a child all the way up to now. I'm 25. And where I kind of see my trajectory, right? So yeah, let's just get into it. I was raised with a Mormon mom. Again, two loving parents, great parents. I love them. But yeah, my mom was Mormon, and then my dad was Jehovah's Witness. Right? My mom, not so much, and my dad, he's kind of even raised a brow at the Jehovah's Witness sort of belief. He'll still go to he'll still go for Easter and shit. But, because me and him will have philosophical discussions all the time, and we'll just talk about life and shit. But yeah, even he's gotten a little skeptical with a lot of the stuff that, the Jehovah's Witnesses teach and what have you. So I grew up in a Christian household, and, I would go to the Mormon church and I would go to the Jehovah's Witness church. But once we hit 12 years old, my dad, he just wanted to embed in us, a moral compass, and a way of ethics, how you should treat people, how you should carry yourself, the whole nine, which I don't believe we're actually bad, you know what I mean? I don't think they're bad as a whole. There are some things where I'm a little skeptical, now. I wouldn't classify myself as a Mormon or Jehovah's Witness, but, he would read the Bible to us and what have you. And from a teenager, I've kind of always had a curious mind, and sort of a philosophical one. I've always sort of questioned reality and, the fabric of life, what it means. And always had an interest in the metaphysical. And why we're here, right? The big questions. So that's kind of the foundation my parents, that's what I was working with. And then from age 12, he basically cut us off. He was like, all right, I gave you guys, the foundation. The foundation I was raised up with. And now you guys are basically free to believe whatever you want. Which I really appreciate my father for, being that liberal and allowing us to express ourselves and explore different ideologies and still love and nurture us. I'm very grateful to him for that. I have no resentment at all, and I think it was a very good foundation. And even the Mormons are great people. I think they have some wacky ideas like the Jehovah's Witness, but nonetheless, great community. I remember when my mom was in the hospital, the Mormons would literally come to our house and to the hospital to bring us food, check up on us. The missionaries would come, always bring food, and, talk about, the teachings of Mormonism and certain lessons. And, very respectful, kind people. And the Jehovah's Witness, I didn't really dabble too much with. The Mormons, I would say, were more active, but nonetheless, once I turned 12, we were free to explore ideas, and we were free to explore even before, right? My dad's a free thinker. I wouldn't really say I had true faith, true belief. in Christianity, in Mormonism, and Jehovah's Witness, I didn't really have like compelling faith. So I would say I started off as an agnostic. I could never subscribe to the atheistic position because to me the atheistic position is a stupid, I think it's a stupid position to hold, and let me elaborate. If there was, now just to be upfront, I fully do believe in the spiritual realm. I do believe in a metaphysical plane that we cannot see with our five senses. I firmly believe that now. But before, I was open to it and just fascinated with the concept. For some reason, I always had an inkling that, like, sort of like Plato's cave allegory, right? What we see are the shadows of the flame of reality. And I actually still do subscribe to that. To a large, very large degree. But yeah, I started off agnostic. I was like, my position was, I don't have enough ample evidence to put a banner, to stake a flag, and sort of hold the position that there is a spiritual plane, there is a metaphysical plane. You know, I always just kept the open idea, like, yeah, there could be a God, there could be a creator. But I didn't really fully believe, right? I was just open to the idea. That's what agnostic means. Then, at around, God, I don't even remember when I did it, like exactly what age, but I think I was around like, it was between 18 and 20. I want to say that I took shrooms. And let me rewind a little. Before I even took shrooms, I would always, you know, be binge watching philosophy videos, reading books of the metaphysical plane. I've read a bunch of books on the Greek mysteries, the Egyptian mysteries, like the Eleusinian mysteries, occultic literature. I started dabbling in that. Started looking into black magic. I never practiced black magic, but I looked into it. I looked into symbolism, heavy. So I would read a bunch of different occultic, religious, sort of spiritual literature. Read a bunch of books on near-death experiences. So I was like, all right, well, there's something here, right? Because a bunch of people are reporting seeing similar things. And me with my curious mind, I was like, well, these people seem to be seeing something. And these myths seem to be having similar themes about death and certain rituals, which led me to the curiosity of psychedelics. And I read a bunch of literature on psychedelics and watched a shit ton of videos on it. And so I started preparing myself, and I was like, you know what? The only way I'm really going to know is if I have an experience, right? Boots on the ground experience. So I did my due diligence, and yeah, started looking up. I read a bunch of different forums, watched a bunch of different YouTube videos about how to do psychedelics, you know, properly, how to not have a bad trip, how to prepare properly, right? How to do it the quote-unquote right way. Not in a recreational sense, but I was looking at it in a scientific sense, a mind of curiosity, through a mind of curiosity and through an objective manner. Like, I'm going to report what I see, and, whatever I experience, and it'll be a real tangible one. So, yeah, as I was doing my due diligence, one of the first things they tell you is, I took shrooms. That was my psychedelic of choice. Never smoked weed, only did weed once with my ex. Well, like 3 times with my ex. And so, yeah, I was looking up how to prepare. One of the things was, you have to fast in order to have like maximum potency. So I fasted for about a day or 2. I wrote my intentions 25 times on a piece of paper. I'm trying to remember what I wrote down exactly on that piece of paper. It was something around the lines of, I want my questions answered whether there is a metaphysical plane or not, right? I didn't write it exactly like that. I just basically wrote, I want my questions to be answered, right? Like, is there a spiritual plane? Is there a metaphysical plane? Basically was my intention. Like, yeah. Made sure I was in a good state of mind. Made sure I was good emotionally. Made sure I wasn't watching horror movies or nothing that could affect my subconscious so I could have a bad trip or increase the risk of a bad trip. So, what else did I do? How else did I prepare? By the way, I don't advocate for drug use. This video is for entertainment purposes only. I am not advocating drug use at all. This is for entertainment purposes only. With that aside, I also, part of my due diligence was, in order to have a profound spiritual experience, you had to be by yourself. And just in case you did have a bad trip, it was good to basically have someone next to you while you do it, so that you could basically have like a comforter, right? Or like a trip sitter, we'll say. So I had my ex-girlfriend, my girlfriend at the time. She was asleep, and I told her that I was going to do it tonight, you know what I'm saying? And she was asleep, but she was next to me, so it was comforting. And she was someone I trusted. And I get the shrooms, and I get a pack of crumble, like those flaky donuts, like the crumble ones, right? Because I wasn't just gonna raw dog the shrooms. That's fucking disgusting. They tasted like shit. So you have to eat it with something to, it just makes it easier, and it makes it easier on the stomach. So it's like midnight, basically, 11 o'clock, 10, 11 o'clock. My girlfriend's asleep. And yeah, I popped the shrooms. And I don't have a bad trip. I actually have like a really positive trip. I have an out-of-body experience. I turned to essentially a nebula or stardust. Best way I can explain it. Had a bunch of crazy visuals. My senses were enhanced like crazy. I could hear the water running through the plumbing system of my bathroom, which you ordinarily couldn't hear, but I could hear it very clearly. I could hear... basically, all of my senses were super, super increased. Right? I got like a stat buff. And every time I would open my eyes, everything looked wavy. And every time I would close it, it was like I had VR goggles on and was seeing a bunch of crazy shit. So then after that experience, the lesson I learned from doing it was, to basically treat people with love, You know, be nurturing, be a kinder person. It was a positive experience overall with a positive message. And it was after that experience that I firmly believed. I was like, okay, yeah, there's definitely a spiritual plane, and I was in that plane. I was in that realm. The best way I can sort of explain it is like in Minecraft, when you enter the Nether realm. It was basically like that, but it wasn't, you know, with a bunch of crazy zombie pigmen or whatnot. It was a positive experience overall. By the way, I'm not advocating it. I don't suggest that anyone do it. This video's for entertainment purposes only. I do not endorse any drug use at all. So yeah, after that, those are like the lessons I learned. I had a, what everyone calls an ego death. And overall, I would say that the experience was positive, and it did give me way more faith and way more of a, it gave me real evidence, and it gave me a real experience of the metaphysical realm, of the spiritual plane. And I'll make a separate video, like fully fleshing out my experience, like in detail, but we're going through my spiritual journey, right? So then after that, I would still consider myself an agnostic. I didn't consider myself agnostic. I did believe that, yeah, we were definitely created by some entity, some God, because I felt like I did see the spiritual realm, and that was ample evidence for me to believe so. Because I wasn't just reading something, I was experiencing and feeling something. It was real, or at least it felt real, right? So then after I didn't consider myself agnostic, I went from agnostic to spiritual but not religious, right? Kept binging occultic videos, kept binging conspiracy theories, you know, occultism. And then I stumbled upon, I revisited Christianity with the spiritual lens, which then led me down a Gnostic rabbit hole. And I found the Gnostic worldview or ideology fascinating. And I believe it made sense. It was like, well, yeah, when I look at the world around me, you know, this doesn't look like the creation of a kind, loving God. This does seem like a prison, you know? Look at the way animals rip each other's fucking throats out, right? Look at how there's injustice in the world. Look at how evil prospers in this world. Look at how good behavior is frowned upon and how evil behavior is rewarded. So I did find the Gnostic interpretation fascinating. And I was watching shit like Billy Carson, Forbidden Knowledge, that's the name of his channel. I was watching a bunch of psychonauts still. And I was exploring even more near-death experiences and shamanistic cultures and tribes and their teachings, their beliefs, their experiences. And I found that all very fascinating. Then after that, I stumbled upon this one guy's YouTube channel, which I highly recommend, called Understanding Conspiracy. And he's notorious for his best work, the one that put him on the map, was his book called The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns, or Looked Like Clowns. Highly suggest that book. Fantastic read. And he's basically making the claim, he's a Christian, and he basically had a similar journey to me. And he's making the claim that the entities you see in the DMT or shroom realm, the spiritual realm, are actually fallen angels, or the descendants of the fallen angels, the Nephilim, written in the book of Enoch, right? And how basically the psychedelic realm is essentially a psyop. Now that was a very fascinating point of view, and something that I found extremely interesting. And it made sense. It made sense. I was like, wow, there's something to what he's saying. And he was basically making the correlation how these entities and these shamanistic tribes have very similar practices, and they report the appearance of the entities are all very clown-esque. You look at the African tribes, you look at the Hindu religion, you look at the Chinese mythology and their religion, and a lot of the entities that they put on their temples, like the Oni, right, the orcs, or ogres, and the African tribes who they paint their face white and they call them their ancestor spirits, and even with Native American tribes with their ancestor spirits, right, with their spiritual rituals, we could say. And he introduced me, not he himself, but he also explored the concept of the timeline being altered. I'm sure you guys have heard of that. But he had put a Christian twist on it, with the old world buildings, and if you guys are familiar, basically like a Christian Tartaria. And he was basically saying that Jesus had actually came already and had already reigned for 1,000 years, and that we're in the little season, and basically we're in the timeline where Satan is let loose for a little while, and basically we were brought back from the dead, and we are the resurrected dead from the initial retribution, written in the Bible, or excuse me, tribulation. We are the resurrected dead, and we're basically being tested to use our free will to do good or do evil, and then God will judge us during the great, white throne judgment. And that's kind of where I've been, and I saw a lot of credence to that theory. I still do. But in my personal life, this is kind of where I am now. I've been exploring, the Gnostic point of view, the whole prison planet concept, the Loosh farm concept, and how, this is actually a prison planet, and this God the God of this realm isn't actually kind and loving, but it's the demiurge, and we're in the prison planet, and we're being harvested for our energy, our loosh, and the elites intentionally put us in a low frequency vibrational state in order to feed off of our negative emotions and our conflicts with their Hegelic dialect. And all sorts of other fuckery, right? How they fuck with us. And we're sort of basically human cattle for these demonic entities. And that the point is to essentially escape this realm and ascend to a higher plane, and that once you die, these demonic entities basically want to put you back into the reincarnation cycle so that they can constantly feed off of our energy, our loosh, keep us in the reincarnation loop. And what they'll say is, anytime someone has an NDE, a near-death experience, they all claim similar things. They'll all report four things, or four things most people report in a near-death experience, which is basically your task here on Earth has been fulfilled, so you have to go back. And then they'll go back to their body. That's one, right? They'll basically say, no, like, you know, you have to go back. You haven't fulfilled your carnal mission. Why you incarnated here in the first place. So that's one common theme. Another common theme, or reporting, is that they'll see dead relatives in the, we'll call the spiritual plane, right? The realm of the dead, the metaphysical plane. Another common report is a life revision of the good you've done and the bad you've done. And they'll basically tell you, or let me rewind a little. The Gnostics basically say that when you die, these entities, they're demonic entities, what they'll do is they want you to keep incarnating so that they can keep farming off of our energy, so that you don't ascend to a higher plane. So the Gnostics are advocating for humanity to ascend to a higher plane, to stop reincarnating. You need to go higher. You need to ascend to a higher frequency, a higher level of existing, past the spiritual realm. And let me expand on that a little bit. What the Gnostics, or the prison planet people, claim is these demonic entities are actually cosplaying or costuming your dead relatives in order to incentivize you to come back to this life. So that's one of them. Another thing that demonic entities are doing is that they're essentially guilt tripping you to reincarnate again, or to not go at a higher dimension or higher level in the spiritual plane. So let's say you don't go back to your body. They'll tell you, oh, you need to, they'll basically do a life review on you, and they'll show you the good and bad you've done, right? So either you're on the naughty or nice list, and they'll show you the good and the bad, and then they'll say, oh, you know, you need to go back, you have unfinished business to fulfill on your incarnation. What's the other thing that the Gnostics claim? Oh, yes. Another thing that a bunch of people who have near-death experiences report is that they all see the light tunnel. And so what the Gnostics, or prison planet people, say is the light tunnel is actually a trap. That's to get you back into the reincarnation cycle, or back into your primary body. Right, so it's either you reincarnate to another body, or you go back to your, you know, the body you are in now. And they'll show you a life report of all the good shit you've done and all the bad shit, right? But the light tunnel, they actually claim that's to get you back in the wheel of samsara, as the Buddhists say. But what the Gnostics are saying is, no, that's a trap. What you have to do is, you have to not get reincarnated, and you have to ascend to a higher plane. Another thing the Gnostics claim is that there are three types of humans. There are Hylics, Psychics, and Pneumatics. Hylics are NPCs, non-player characters, and they're soulless. Psychics are basically like half NPC, half enlightened. They basically have like a group soul. And then the Pneumatics are the enlightened ones, the ones who see the world for what it is, right? They're the, we'll call main characters, right? They're the people who actually see reality for what it is. Basically like the trailblazers, I guess, right? They're the enlightened ones. And that's kind of where I've been at now, because I do agree with a lot of the stuff that Gnostics say. And I do find it very fascinating. And where I am currently is I'm exploring, I'm revisiting paganism. I'm revisiting paganism because I'm having some problems with Christianity, and there's some things about Christianity that I seem to have a problem with, and some things that kind of raise an eyebrow too. So one of the things is like this sort of pacifist mentality that Christendom breeds, and it's something that I appreciate of something like Odin, who's able to basically, you know, dabble in the dark, not evil necessarily, but basically be a little more Machiavellian, be a little more strategic, and not so pacifistic, right? That's kind of what I've been exploring recently, and I've been exploring how Christianity is potentially a Jewish psyop, and I'll make more videos on that when I discover more information on that. But going back to the Gnostic, because it's kind of where I am now, because I'd label myself like a Christian mystic. I think that's the most appropriate labeling, I guess, I'd give myself. But I feel like ultimately I'm just a spiritual mystic, you could say. But I do appreciate the Christian values and morality and ethics, I really do. But I never like to put myself in a box. That's why I label myself a spiritual, a mystic. I can't really ever just put myself in a box of a religion, because I feel like that'll prevent me from being a free thinker. And if I discover truths that I believe are true, the dogma of the religion, any religion I subscribe to, will not allow me to adopt different truths I come upon, right? And just the experience of my own life, right? With my own philosophy and how I carry myself in this world. I think overall, I think the Gnostics are onto something. And I think there is something about Odin, the Allfather, which comes from Norse mythology, that is really resonating with me. And I'm definitely going to make more videos, or, you know, videos just talking about Odin, who he was, and basically an analysis and comparing it to Christendom and other religions. And it's really something it's a belief system that I can really empathize with and really relate to with my own life as a business owner and a leader. And it's a lot of truths that I feel like Christendom just doesn't confront, that something like the philosophy or religion of Odin really does tackle. So that's kind of where I am now. So just to kind of recap, went from being agnostic to spiritual but not religious, to I guess a sort of Gnostic Christian mysticism, to now exploring and entertaining Odinistic philosophies or ideas that really do resonate with me. I mean, really, really do resonate with me. Just his story. It's very fascinating to me. And yeah, that's kind of where I am now. And I just wanted to make a video on, I guess, the journey from when I was a child to where I am now, is, you know, at 24. And yeah, that's a video.